Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. David Kelly here, race director of the Great World Race. We have with us today the US record holder in both the marathon and half marathon distances. He boasted PR or personal best in the marathon of 2 hours, 4 minutes and 58 seconds and a half marathon time of 59 minutes, 43 seconds. During his racing days, he weighed in at a tad over 120 pounds. He bulked up to over 200 pounds. He is currently weighing in somewhere in the middle. Ryan Hall, you're extremely welcome to the Great World Race podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, David.
I appreciate your patience, Ryan, because that was my third time of introing. So I do appreciate your patience there for everyone that's watching out there.
All good. I have my own podcast, so I understand how it can go. I was recording my own in my own garage, and I was my only guest. I was just like going off on little different topics that I talk about or whatever. Sometimes I'd get like 20 minutes into it. I'm like, this sucks. I got to redo the whole thing, and it'd take me like 10 different takes. So I get it.
That's all right. I appreciate your patience, Ryan. So Ryan, we'll go back to your high school career. Obviously, you had a storied career both through high school, college, and then elite level. So if we go back to the year was 2000, it was, many say, probably really the turnaround for US distance running. There was yourself, Dathan Ritzenhein, and Alan Webb, all who obviously went on to, do extremely well on the world stage. So go back to the Foot Locker cross country. How was that with the two guys, Dathan and Alan?
Yeah, that was our first big. I think that was the only time we actually all raced in the same race. I think ever. I don't think we all, even as pros, I don't think we ever were all. Maybe our freshman year in college cross country, actually, we might have matched up again, but that was kind of a rare matchup. So yeah, it was fun. I'd raced both those. Well, actually, that was my first time racing Alan. I'd raced Dathan before, and the way he runs, he always just goes to the front and pushes hard and stuff. So you always know when you're going to race him, like you're in for a pain fest. It's going to be a hard one. It's not going to be a sit and kick race. So, yeah, it was fun to mix it up with those guys, and now all these years later to look back on it and see what we went on to do, and we're still friends to this day, and so looking back at it, it's like a special memory. But yeah, Dathan, he in that race he threw a little surprise at us and didn't go to the front right away, and that was probably one of my first experiences where I learned in racing that it's better to not have like really firm expectations of how you think the race is going to play out, because most of the time it doesn't play out the way you want it to. So that was one of the first times where I really had to learn that lesson, being like, it's better to just go in the race ready for anything and not expecting anything, and just be able to flow with whatever comes your way. Because I think Dathan didn't start pushing until like the mile, and then he flew by us and moved pretty hard, and then Alan kind of went with them. I was too far back, and I was slow on my response in that race, and so he kind of gapped us and just got a gap and held it, and he ran great in that race. And then I was trying to track down Alan towards the end, but didn't quite get him. So yeah, I ended up third, and Alan was second, and Dathan won. But yeah, that was a special memory that we all kind of look back at fondly.
Yeah, because I can imagine so. Because obviously Dathan the following year went on to finish third at the World Cross Country in the junior event, and I think Matt Tegenkamp was fifth that day.
That's right.
So it was really a move forward in US distance running. Sorry?
So was that in Ireland? I remember it being somewhere like cold and muddy, and I'm trying to remember where that race was.
No, it was the year after. It was in Ireland. I think that was in Belgium that year. I think it was Ostend in Belgium. I think Paula Radcliffe might have won the senior women's race that day.
That's right.
Were you weren't interested in that team? I think the team finished third that day as well.
Yeah, I was like super into track. Like I always loved track better than cross country. So whenever cross country is over, I was like, yes, cross country's over. I didn't want to like extend it out into the winter, because our cross country season's in the fall. So I was always like excited to start my track training. I was always done with. I thought I was a short distance guy back then. I was like, I'm a miler. I don't want to be doing cross country.
So the main reason you didn't go to Ostend that year was to the World Cross. You were getting ready for track.
Yeah. I always loved track. a lot better than cross country because I thought I was a miler, and which is good. I think for kids and youth, it's good to work on that speed when you're younger. It's like that long stuff will always be there, but developing the speed early on, I'm a big believer in that. But yeah, I thought I was a miler for sure. I would have never thought when I was 18 years old that I'd be, running the marathon competitively one day, and certainly never thought I'd do the world 7 marathon, 7 days, 7 continents. That was way outside my grid at that point. Like a 10-mile run felt like a long ways.
Yeah, well, it's good to know you're back this year. But Ryan, just on that note, like you were a 402 high school miler, is that correct?
Yeah, I ran 342 for 1500 and 402 for 1600. I don't know why we ran 1600, but yeah, 402 was what I ran my senior year.
And just obviously that year, Alan Webb ran 353 in Eugene. I think it was in one of the Golden Leagues. Actually, I think he finished like third, Al Garouge. Like, was that motivation inspiring? Thinking I can run that fast? You're thinking that dude is like just so fast. Like I've ran 402. I'm one of the fastest high school milers in the US. That guy's ran like 9 seconds faster than me.
Right? Yeah. No, it was all of that. It was inspiring. It was also like frustrating. It was uh yeah, like it's funny. I remember watching the race, because I'd competed against him and we came up in the same time, and so he was doing the things that I wanted to be doing, like I'd been training and I really wanted to break four when I was in high school. Was a big dream of mine, and never quite got there. And so I remember watching that race, the Prefontaine Classic, and when he ran 353, I was just like, what? I was like, dude, that is crazy. But it's also frustrating because I was like, dude, I've been training so hard. Like, why could I not do that? So it's like inspiring, it's motivating, but it's also like I remember I was in such a bad mood after that race. I went out and played basketball and I like got in a fight with my brothers or something like that.
Yeah, it's understandable. Like I remember I was at home watching it on TV. Like it was so fast at the time, and it wasn't like he absolutely destroyed Jim Ryan's record, and like Ryan went on to win the Olympics. As a so like it was unbelievable, really, considering he beat the collegiate champion there. So it wasn't any, you were still an outstanding. Like 342 would correlate to a sub 4 minute mile, so it wasn't like you were a slouch in high school or that far off. His run was just that far out there for
Yeah.
anyone from the US at the time was just unbelievable.
Yeah, it was. He was, paving the way for now. You see the generations of kids who are running fast, and he still has the record though, right? Or did a high school kid break that? I don't even know.
Yeah, no, he still has the record. Drew Hunter broke his indoor record, but he still has the outdoor record
Nah, okay, nice.
for the meantime.
Yeah,
With
yeah. I
the
mean,
spikes
kids
and
are
all that, I'm
rolling,
sure it could be on borrowed time.
right?
Yeah, it's like 4 minutes you need to even compete in the top 5 or 6
Get the
high
whole
school athletes today.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
You had it then after high school, you headed off to Stanford. I know you had 1 or 2 years there. Where my understanding is you had a couple of injuries there. Had you?
yeah. I had started off with IT band issues, and then I had some shin splints, and yeah, I had like my first couple of years at Stanford were real rough, and actually my first 3 years, my sophomore year, actually like dropped out and left Stanford for the winter quarter because I was like just not doing well at all, like really with anything. So it was a real tough period. But then came back and finally things kind of clicked that fourth year for me on the track, especially. I did well in cross country my third year, but yes, college was a real challenge for me because I came from a real close family and was pretty like sheltered in Big Bear. All I did was like train, and that was pretty much it. And so then going off to school, you're presented with all the different things that come with college living, and loud dorms, and it was so hard to sleep even. Like that's one thing. It's like training is only half the equation. The other half is the rest and recovery that you have to get. And so my freshman year, I was just put with a random roommate like all the other kids, and I had a real hard time sleeping, and and he's like working on. He wasn't even. He was respectful too. It's just like he's on his computer at midnight typing away or whatever, and you just like cannot fall asleep. So my whole freshman year, I had like an eye twitch. My eye was just twitching out the whole time because I just was not sleeping enough. So, that's when the injuries come, the sickness comes, and the training just doesn't click at all. So for the first like 2 years, I was really just, it was a rough kind of introduction to college for me, but things finally kind of clicked there. My junior year in cross country, our team won, and we had the second best cross country score in history, NCAA history, scored like 17 points. And that was the fun to be a part of that, and then finally in track my senior year, things really clicked. But up until that point, I was like, well, I better figure out what I'm going to do with my life because my running is not going well enough to be able to run professionally, So I started to look at like what kind of jobs am I going to get after school and all this stuff. And then NCAA's, I'd been running well all season with my teammate Ian Dobson. We'd been working super well together, and I was just kind of like riding his coattails around. And then I ended up winning NCAA's. Ian was second, and then that just kind of like opened up the doors for me to run professionally. And Sarah was going to run professionally as well. So it's cool how in running things can be going so bad, it's like so bleak looking, and you're like, well, this is not going anywhere. And then all of a sudden things can click and the clouds part and the sun comes out, and all of a sudden it's just like this beautiful perfection. You're like, dang, I'm glad I hung in there because it was freaking ugly there for a while.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of athletes out there will agree with you on your statement there. The ups and downs of high-end athletics is definitely not an easy it's not an easy place to be at certain times along your career. And just on that race was yourself, I know you won and Ian was second. Was Nick Willis third in that race?
I think he was, yeah. I think he was because we were worried about him because he was a 1500 guy and he had really good speed, And so actually our coach, Andy Girard, who's a great coach. I loved him. He's one of my favorite coaches I got to work with. He was talking with the Wisconsin coach, who was Jerry Schumacher at the time. And they had this 5,000 was loaded up. It was Chris Solinsky was in there, and I don't know if Tegenkamp was in there, Matt Tegenkamp. He might have been in there too. There was a bunch of really good dudes. But anyways, he worked it out with the coach at Wisconsin, Jerry, to like have his guys take the first like mile or whatever. And then Ian and I would take the next mile. And then it's just like every man for himself after that. But the whole plan was like just get away from Nick Willis because we knew like if he was there with 800 to go, he was going to beat us, he had the wheels. So, it worked out just right. I think Josh or Chris and I think it was Matt Tegenkamp took the first mile, and then me and Ian took it, and then me and Ian just worked together, and we rolled away from everyone, and then it's just Ian and I at the end. And yeah, it worked out. It's one of those races where it actually did just work out exactly how we'd planned. It was like, oh, imagine that. That's crazy. It actually happened the way we wanted it to, but usually doesn't happen that way,
No, it generally doesn't. And did yourself and Ian qualify for the Worlds that year as well?
Yeah, we did. We went on. Ian ended up second. USA's, I was third. And so we went to Helsinki and got to compete in my first World Championships. So that was pretty cool, because at that point, like I said, my collegiate career was so rough. I'd never even qualified for NCAAs. And then my senior year, I ended up winning NCAAs and then qualifying for my first World Championships, going to Europe for the first time. I had to get a passport and never been like international anywhere. So it was quite a crazy. And then during that time period, Sarah and I also got engaged and I signed a pro contract. So it was like, and I wasn't even planning on finishing school. I was planning on coming back for a fifth year, but kind of in running, it's like when you're hot, like it's a good time to like go out. And so I was like, with the way things have been with me so up and down and all over the place, I was like, who knows what next year is going to be like. I'm going to definitely sign this contract and start making some money.
Sign on the dotted line when it's there. Absolutely.
especially because I grew up in the middle of
And
five kids. My dad was a teacher. My mom's a stay-at-home mom. So like I was telling my girls this, I was like, I remember when I had $100, like that was all I had, and I was in college. And like my bank account never had more than like $500 in it, and it was like money I'd like worked for over the summertime. Like me and my dad would do construction. We'd like repair houses and like roofs and stuff like that, like just real hard manual labor work. And I'd scrounge up a little money, and that would like last me through college, be dwindling the whole year. And so I never had any money at all. So when I finally like signed a contract and I was like getting paid, it was a little bit weird at first. Felt like kind of strange to be running, and like the whole time in the back of my mind, I'm like, dude, I would do this. I've been doing this for free, and I'd continue to do this for free. So it's kind of crazy that someone's paying me to do this now, but I'll take it.
no, absolutely. And I suppose it's great to hear from a purist point of view as well. In the world, it's all brand and sponsorship, that actually someone's out there that actually just wants to compete and run.
Yeah, I mean that's how it was for us. It was just all like we were doing it because we loved it. But there was also, like I was saying, my family was pretty poor, so I knew like if I was gonna go to college, I was gonna have to get a scholarship, or I was just gonna have to go to community college or work a side job, or like if I was gonna make it in the world, it's because I like hustled to do it. And so I think it's kind of interesting to look at different things that motivate us, to do things such as running, and like even as kids, and figure out like, I don't know, how to have motivators that are good and pure, but also are like give you a little kick in the pants too. I've seen this with some athletes I coach as well, where it's like when their back is up against the wall, their contract's coming up, and they're not sure if they're going to re-sign. Like somehow that year, like they'll freaking pull it out and like do some pretty crazy stuff. So I think it's okay to allow some of those things to come into play. And you see that a lot with like the African runners, Ethiopians, Kenyans. They're highly motivated individuals because, if they're going to feed their family, it's banking on their legs, doing the work to bring home those checks, so that's a highly motivating thing. So yeah, it's interesting, the whole motivation thing, what's behind what we do, what drives us. It's interesting. And then as that changes, once you're taken care of and you no longer have that motivator and that drive, like can you find something else that is equally as powerful, or can you not? So yeah, it's interesting when you really go into like what is driving me to do what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, because it's funny. I think you're just talking about what drives people. The legendary, obviously, marathon runner Steve Jones had lost his contract. I'm not sure who it was with, like years ago, and he'd no contract, so he wore nothing. He wore like a plain like white singlet, and he goes out and breaks the world record in Chicago.
Yeah, I love that race. That's like my all-time favorite race to watch because he just went out like a bat out of hell all by himself. What was he, like 61 something at the half, and you're in 207?
Yeah, I think he was 61. I think that might have been an earlier. I think the year he had no sponsor, he ran 208. I think when he ran the 207 was the event you're talking about. And like he went down like 61:50 or something, or faster, like no pacemaker. Like I think like basically like he was like sub 60-minute pace at like 10K. It wasn't like it was perfect splits to get to the 61:50 either. Like I always reckon if he was around today, like even pre shoes, and he had paced that, he probably would have ran like 205,
Mm,
because he he went out so hard. Like it was
yeah,
an unbelievable run. No pacemakers, no nothing. Like he was just a beast.
he looked like he was a man on fire. He looked like he was just on a mission that day. Like he just didn't even care.
Yeah, no, it was an absolutely legendary run. So, but it's pretty insightful. There, you talk about the necessity of having to achieve as well. I suppose things come so easy to a lot of people these days as well, that once sometimes you get the money or the contracts, it doesn't work out because think you don't have the same drive. Because I follow the NBA a lot, and it's actually funny. Charles Barkley had referenced that in a um, on TV one night. People were asking him, about contracts and all that, and he said Michael Jordan I know he had a huge contract, but he said Michael Jordan's aim was to be the best. Everything else was in the background. He said he just played to be the best. He didn't care about anything else. And he said when you're that good, everything else follows.
Which is great because then you're not making stupid decisions based on money too, because it's like, as a runner, it's like you have all these opportunities. It's like, hey, show up to this race, get 10 grand, show up to this race, get 50 grand, whatever it is, depending on how good you are, whatever. Like, that's like for the upper end guys. But still, like, you could go chasing dollar bills and tire yourself out and not do what's right for your long-term development. Whereas, like, you got to sacrifice money sometimes to get the most out of yourself, and for looking at your long-term trajectory and making sure you're getting the most out of yourself and respecting your body. And that's a lesson you got to learn too as a pro. You start chasing dollar bills and things get real sideways real quick.
And you went pro, that was in 2005?
Yeah, correct.
And you raced, you had a couple of years, maybe like 2 years before you moved up to the marathon distance. How did that go, Ryan? Had you, from a racing point of view and training point of view, you moved away, you moved to Terrence-Mahon then, is that correct?
Yeah. I was working with Terrence when I graduated Stanford. That's where Ian was going. I was like, I don't know where I'm going, but Ian and another teammate of ours that Sarah's training with, Alicia, is friends. She's friends with her. We're both going up there, so it just made sense to follow them up there. And we just, Terrence was a great coach and great situation. Training in Mammoth is a beautiful place to train as well. Hey, let me move real quick. Sorry, my daughter just hopped on the stair mill right next to us.
No, no problem at all. Got to keep the fitness up.
Yeah, I gotta show you this.
Like daughter, like father, like always exercising.
So this is our house, right? So this is our front door here, right? So you come in the front door, and
okay, nice.
The stair mill.
Stairmaster, nice. So it's a fitness. So the pressure's on the minute you walk in the door. There's some fitness in the house going on.
Yeah, it's like, it was the only place the stair mill would fit in the house, because you need like really high ceilings because it's really tall, so we had to put it right in the entryway. Oh, it's so funny. Hopefully, let me know if the Wi-Fi is good enough for you.
Great.
But
Wi-Fi is good here, brother.
Okay, cool. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, reset up.
No problem. Always good to get, like, it's like MTV Cribs all coming back.
Oh man, stair mill is great.
So just Ryan, you went pro, went up to Terrence. Was the decision to like move up to the higher distances somewhat quickly? Did it happen once you got there at Terrence kind of assessed you beforehand? Had you made that decision, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so I mean, it really was a matter of me like getting humbled enough on the track to be willing to go up to the marathon. Because I'd always been under the mindset of like, I'm a miler, I'd watch like that Prefontaine movie like 1,000 times where he's like, I'm not going to let anyone tell me I'm not fast enough, And the truth though is like, some people are not fast enough. And I was one of them. I was not fast enough to be like a world-class miler, but like my whole childhood, watched a movie. Every time I feel like I'm not fast enough, watch Prefontaine, be like, no, I'm fast enough. I'm not going to let anyone tell me. But no, like the truth was I'm not fast enough. So finally, like after getting worked on the track over and over and over again and not getting any faster at the 1500, I was like, all right, well, if I'm be competing with the best guys in the world, which was what my goal was from the time I started running when I was 13 years old, it's like, I'm going to have to move up in distance to do that, And then sure enough, as soon as I moved up, things started really clicking and started mixing it up and having some bigger performances. So it was mainly like getting my butt kicked on the track. I remember I was doing this 5,000 meter race in London, and Craig Mottram was in it, and Kenenisa Bekele and all these guys, and they were just freaking rolling. And I remember I was on the back stretch and they were finishing, and I was like watching the big Jumbotron, I was like watching them fight it out for the win while I'm like 300 meters behind running, not even in the race at all. And I was like, this is not what I pictured. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, I need to move up. I got to try it out. And then, like I said, as soon as I started it, in cross country, I'd run really well over the longer distance, 12K cross country, my first time running. I won a national title in that. And it really, honestly, the longer stuff, it always clicked better for me. Like I was always more naturally suited for it. Like even when I was a senior in high school, 18 years old, I could run 10 miles under 5 minute pace for my thresholds, So I should have known like right from the outset I was better at the longer stuff, but I just really enjoyed the short, fast stuff on the track, even though I wasn't naturally as suited for it. But yeah, so that's why I moved up fairly quickly. Then so I went back after getting my butt kicked on the track that summer, started training for longer stuff, qualified for the world championships, set an American record in 20K. And then my first half marathon ran 59 minutes. So it all happened pretty quick. But one thing I learned from that experience is just how important it is to work on your weaknesses. So like for me, the track stuff, 1500 speed, 5000 speed, it does not come natural to me. It's hard for me to get sharp in those distances, and I'm not super good at those distances. But if I'm good in those distances, then I'm nasty over the half marathon distance, right? So it's like you got to work on your weaknesses as an athlete. And I think a lot of people tend to just gravitate towards what they like to do and train what feels good all the time. And then you slowly start to lose your grip on being good at your best events because you're no longer working your weaknesses, So it can be a little bit more of a challenge as you get older to work on those things, working on foot speed and things like that. You might have to get a little bit more creative with like hill sprints and stuff. But I think it's always important. And one reason why I think it's good to like have a coach is he kind of forces you to do things, he or she forces you to do things that you wouldn't like to do, like if you just have it your way and you just go what you want to do all the time, you're probably not going to get the best results you could possibly get because you're going to be neglecting your weaknesses. So it's a balance. My dad used to always say, he's like focus on your strengths but work on your weaknesses. And I think that's kind of a good way to look at it. It's like it's not that you neglect your strength and you don't go to that and enjoy that part of running, but also like a balanced approach to running is to also be aware of your weaknesses and always working on your weaknesses, trying to get better in those areas. Because that's kind of like low hanging fruit. If you can get better at the stuff you suck at, then you're going to be a lot better at the things you're good at.
Yeah, very wise words there. And you talked there that kind of the breakthrough it was in Houston. How was that? Obviously, I think you took over a minute off the North American record, not just the US record. How was
Yeah.
like that? Was definitely, I suppose, from a elite point of view, that was the first huge breakthrough.
Yeah, that was one of those races where I was just feeling so good going into it. You talk about like, I was talking about the sun coming out and the clouds parting and everything just kind of clicking. And that was certainly one of those kind of moments. Like even more than the race, what I remember is how good I felt in the week leading up to it. Like I'd been training for a marathon. So, my volume was a lot higher than it had been doing a ton of threshold work. And then all of a sudden, like I just started feeling like $1,000,000, And I remember like even like the last couple of runs before the race, I was like, man, I feel like I have springs on my legs. They feel so good. It was crazy. And so I knew like something good was going to happen, but I didn't know what was going to happen. And certainly wasn't expecting to break an hour. So it was one of those races where you're looking down at your watch, and that was the time of like I just had a Timex watch, so you'd run through the mile and you hit your split and you look down, you see what it is, you have no idea how fast you're going, And I remember the first mile like wasn't crazy, but it felt easy. I was like 4:37 through the first mile, and I was all by myself the whole way too. So it's just like me trying to feel my body out there, And then the second mile, I was like, dang, I was like, that felt pretty good. Like, let me just push a little more. And the next mile was like 4:32. And I was like, dang, that felt pretty good. That still feels easy. And I started getting like pretty excited about how things were going. Then my next mile, I remember, came through, it was like 4:28. I was like, dude, you better get a hold of yourself. Like, this is going to get out of control. You don't want to blow up. But it was just one of those days where you're looking at your watch and you're like, dang, can this be right? I'm like, it does not. Like, these splits usually feel much more difficult than this, you know? So it was cool because, I didn't have many of those days. Maybe other guys do. I did not. Like, in my career, I had a handful of days like that where things were like really clicking. But man, when they were really clicking, it was super, super, super fun. And so certainly a day, always reflect back on and be like, I wish I could live that one again. That was a good time because, it was one of those races where it never even felt like all that hard. And that's why, like, when people like judge other athletes, they'll be like, oh, that guy's dirty. Like, he ran some race and he wasn't even tired afterwards. You see him, you didn't even like collapse at the finish line or anything. But it's like, on your best days, it's not like that. It's like, you don't run crazy stuff because you like tried harder. It's like things are just clicking in your body. And when it's clicking like that, like, it's always like not the hardest race of your life, So it was a special day for sure, and a day where I was finally realizing, okay, like, yeah, I'm running now. Like, that put me in the top, I think top 10 times all time in the half marathon distance at that point. And then like right after that, like, they're like, oh, white guy ran under an hour, and then all the African guys like started doing it on like all the time. Like, it must not be that hard if a white guy's doing it.
I don't know, man. It's a record. It's one of the US record that still stands. It stood the test of time through all the shoes and developments. If we talked about it in Boston, even like obviously Galen Rupp, dual medalist in the Olympics, hasn't. He's like, I think he's broken the hour, but like he's like maybe 10 or 12 seconds off it. So
No, I'm
there's not too
shocked that
many
it's
records that have
still.
stood the last couple of years.
You're right, yeah, and it will go at some point,
You think
and
it'll
I'll be
go?
happy. Yeah, I'll be happy to hand it off. But honestly, though, like, with the shoe technology, in my mind, I won't concede that they're fitter than me unless they break it by over a minute. Because I think the shoes are worth a minute, but hard to say. It's all speculation, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair. I think it's pretty fair if they don't like. So you basically want to see them to run around 57:30, and then you'll give the kudos off to whoever breaks it.
Or 58:43. If they break 58:43, I'll tip my hat and be like, you are fitter than me. If they don't, I'll be like, I don't know. No one knows. And that's the thing. No one will ever know. I'd love if they just like run them in the retro shoes, Like, that would take some real courage on someone's part. Like, strap on some shoes that they can bend in half and then go see what can happen.
Be nice. So after that half marathon, you moved up. You had your first experience in the marathon in London shortly after.
Yeah, debuted at London, and
Did
that
that feel as
was.
easy?
No, it didn't. To be honest, like, I was a little overcooked at that point. Like, I was kind of like, Terrence wanted me to take a good break after the half, and I remember I'm pretty good at like convincing coaches to like not give me as much rest as they want to give me. So I like talked them into like giving me less rest. I'm like, oh, I'm ready. I swear, I feel great, and I did feel really good coming out of it. But it's just London was a long time off still. Like, I ran that half in mid-January, and London's mid-April, and because I was planning on racing a marathon before that, but after I ran that half, the doors opened up at London, and I'd get to run with Haile Gebrselassie, Paul Turgot, Felix Lima, like all the best marathoners in the world at that point. And I was like, I'm not, this is an opportunity I can't miss. I remember, in that race, I was in the second group, and it was like Gomez dos Santos, the Brazilian guy who just won New York. Webb was in there, silver medalist in the Olympics. Stefano Baldini was in there, gold medalist in Athens. Like, and this was the second group. We were like a minute back from the lead group, who had Haile Gebrselassie, Paul Turgot, the world record holder at the time, Felix Lima, all these rollers, And I was like, Man, it was cool just to be around those guys, be mixing it up with them. Then ended up catching up to them when we crossed the Tower Bridge, a little over halfway apart. Mark, I caught back up to the lead group because they were supposed to go at world record pace, and then I don't know, they weren't feeling it or something, so decided not to. It was a little bit warm that day, but I'll never forget catching up and running with Haile and going to the front of the group. And yeah, it was funny in that race. I told the pacemaker I caught up, I was like, hey, let's go faster, because I don't know what they were doing. Like, they were supposed to be running faster. I wasn't supposed to be running with them at all. I was like, hey, go faster, like push. And so he started pushing, and then I got dropped off the back of the group. So it was some
So
funny,
you got what
funny
you wish for,
moments.
Ryan.
Yeah, I dropped myself. But I remember like coming down the final couple miles of that race and just seeing the tall, slender figure of Paul Turgot with his he had his gold uniform on because he's the world record holder at the time or whatever, and trying to chase him down. I didn't catch him at the end, but just it's pretty special getting to mix it up with those guys. Those guys are legends in the sport. So very very cool kind of first marathon for me. I had no regrets on that one, but I was a little bit physically, I think, a little bit like past my sweet spot. I wasn't feeling as good as I was feeling after Houston. I didn't ever feel that good again leading up to that race. I mean, I did like years later in other races, but not before London. Yeah, it's kind of a little overcooked, I think.
And you debuted in London that time was 2:08. Is that correct?
Yeah, 2:08:24. That was my debut. So I was stoked on the time. That was back when 2:08 was fast. So I was happy with that one.
Yeah, it's still fast for some, Ryan, but I do appreciate from a world class point of view, things have, as you said there, the shoes have moved on. A lot of things have moved on. And Ryan, that brings us to the Olympic trials in New York. Hilly course, you're there. I know a few people that were there that day, and one of my friends, he was like a 3:42, 1500 guy. He reckons it was the best. He said it was the best performance he'd ever seen in person. He said you looked like it was just you and a load of kids you were running with. And notably Dathan, and considered with some world class athletes there. He said you looked that easy.
Yeah, that was again like kind of a Houston kind of day for me as well. But it felt different though. It played out different. Like I remember we went out like a little bit slower in that race. And I was content to just I think me Terrence had told me like we were just gonna not lead for the first part or whatever and just wait until later in the race. And I was content to just like sit in the lead group. And actually Mike Wardian went off the front in that group. It was him and one other guy. They went off the front the first mile and we all just let him go, and they got some good TV time. I don't remember what time. That was the first time I became aware of Mike Wardian. So it was fun to get to, run the 777 with him years later and have him join me during his 18-mile cool down on after his last marathon when he's setting the record doing that. But that was the first time I remember Mike. So that was funny. But yeah, we went out like pretty slow. It was like 66:30 or something like that. And I remember not feeling as good as I wanted to feel. It's kind of like if you're running a marathon, whether you go out like as fast as you can hold for the marathon or like 2 or 3 minutes slower than that, it all kind of feels kind of hard, and doesn't feel necessarily easy to run that fast. So I remember like coming through the half, I was like, well, that didn't feel that great. But it's one of those deals where it's like when you start moving, you start feeling good. So we got it packed down to, I think it was like 4 or 5 of us in the lead group. And then, Central Park, we're doing loops and we come through with one loop to go. So like 6 miles to go. And I look up on the Jumbotron and they're showing Khalid Kanuchi, who's the world record holder at the time, 2:05:32, American record holder now. And he's coming, he's catching us, and I was like, oh, I can't let him back in the race. So I just went to the front and just started pushing just to keep the gap growing between us and Khalid. And then that's when I started feeling really good and things really started clicking, and got a gap, and actually learned from a mistake I'd made when I'd raced Dathan before at NCAA's cross country. We had raced, and I had been feeling super good in that race, and it was just him and I towards the end of the race in cross country. It was like 8K into a 10K cross country race, and there was a downhill, and I got a gap on him, and I was like, oh, it's too early to go. I'm a 1500 guy. I was like, I need to just wait, And so I like just slowed down and like let him catch me. And and then he ended up out kicking me at the end of that race. So it was one of those races I always like was kicking myself about. I was like, that was so stupid. I was like, if I would have went then, I know I would have won. I could have got a gap and just kept it. Like I know, because I was feeling good. And so I remember that in the trials race years later, I was like, got a gap, and it seemed too early, still 6 miles to go. I was like, it seems early to go, but I was like, I'm feeling good. Like I'm not waiting this time. Like I'm freaking going. So I just, started pushing a little bit, and there's like the harder I pushed, the better I felt. It was crazy. And also it was like a weirdly spiritual experience for me, which I have never fully understood why this was the case. I think it's interesting how like I don't know, at least for me anyways, spiritual experiences can be very tied to the state of my physical body. And so it's like when things are really flowing physically in my body, like I connect spiritually as well. So it's like kind of like the body can lead the spirit into a connection with the divine that is pretty cool. So that's kind of what happened. Like I just felt like I was just like in a crazy flow state, and it turned into like just a very spiritual experience. I think partially because I had a pretty strong spiritual encounter when I was training for that race, because training was not going well at all in the summertime. Like I was 3 months before that race, I was on the phone with Sarah. She was in Europe competing on the track, and I was telling her, I was like, there is no way I'm going to make this Olympic team. I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it, because I was feeling so trashy. My training was going so crappy, and I had no idea why it's going so bad. And those are the worst kind of scenarios for runners. It's like if you know why you suck, then you can handle that. You can work on it. You can fix the problem. But if you don't know what's wrong, then you're just like pulling out your hair and you're super stressed out, and you got the biggest race of your life coming up in 3 months. You should make the team. Like I was ranked number 1, should have had the fastest time going into it. And I'm like, finally have the opportunity to make my first Olympic team. And now I just suck, and I don't even know why. I was like, yeah, as you can imagine, like just going crazy in the mountains. And Sarah wasn't at home. So I'm just like walking around the house. Like we had like a double wide mobile home we were living in at the time. And I remember just walking around the house and just being so freaking down and depressed. Like the TV wouldn't even be on, and I'd just be sitting there just staring at it for like hours. And just could not figure out what was going on with me. It's so frustrating. And that's when I was talking to Sarah, and I was like, I'm not going to make it. I'm like, I can't freaking figure out what's going on with my body and why things are not clicking. And then, so I went from this like state of like sitting on the couch eating like 1,000 donuts and cartons of ice cream to feeling like just finally like being at the end of my rope and just like praying, and just one of those like super frustrated prayers where it's like, I don't know, God, like I freaking suck, I can't figure anything out, like what do you want me to do here? And I was just feeling like just a little nudge, like, hey, just like go for a run. I was like, this is not what I feel like doing right now. Like I just ate like all this crap and I feel terrible, and I do not feel like going for a run. But I was like, whatever, I'm just go for a run. So I went for a little just cruisy run out in the meadow, super peaceful, really cool meadow that we used to have all these bears that would be out there. One time I saw that, not on this occasion, but there's a pond out there. I saw this bear just like floating on his back out there one day when I was running past there. It's so cool. There's like bears everywhere. They go cruising past our mobile home all the time. But anyways, I was out running, and I was just feeling like God
Sounds
wanted.
safe.
What's that?
Said it sounds very safe. Bears
Yeah.
cruising around the place.
I never, if they're not grizzly bears, I've never been too worried about. I like when I see bears in nature, just as long as they're not grizzly bears. If it's a grizzly bear, I'd feel different for sure. But these are just like black bears or brown bears, I forget. But anyways, I was, doing this run. I was feeling like God wanted me to just kind of like celebrate like I had won the Olympic trials, and I'm just out in the woods all by myself. And I was like, I don't feel like doing that either. I was like, that sounds like the worst idea ever. I do not feel like I'm winning the Olympic trials right now. But I was like, all right, whatever. Like, I'm just going to do it. And so I did it, just like put my hands up, felt silly, felt like looking around to make sure no one could see me, situation. One of those like awkward moments you have with yourself out in the forest and you pray that no one sees it. It was like that. But I could, when I did that, I could feel like a shift in what was happening inside of me, and I think that's something that a lesson that I take with me the rest of my life. It's like when you look at like Jesus, when he stilled the waters, when he's on the sea and he's out on the sea with his disciples, and he's in some gnarly storm, right? And the guy's a freaking sleep in the boat, he's asleep. Like I'm sure the boat's going up and down, the wind's going crazy. His disciples are freaking out. They're like, we're gonna die. And Jesus is like, and I think about that all the time. Like, and then, he gets up and he's like, guys, like, chill out, be still. And then the whole storm disappears. Right. But it's like, if we are going to calm the seas of our life, the stuff that we all go through, the tragedy, the triumph, all the hard times that we all endure as human beings, we all go through stuff all the time. And if we're going to be able to calm those seas, like, first we got to be asleep in the boat. First we have to have like the inner calmness, like the change has to happen in here before it happens out here and it's manifest in the world. And so that's kind of what I felt in that moment when I was out on that run, was like nothing circumstantially in the outside world had changed at all. I was still in the same shape, I still had the same body, like there was no miraculous thing that happened to me during that time, but there was like a shift that happened inside of here, like the waves, the storm, the peace, it came in here. And then slowly the changes started to manifest themselves externally. My training started to click just a little bit better, start trending in the right direction. The ship was going the right way. And I just stayed in the mountains for like 3 months training for that race. I didn't do one tune-up race. I didn't leave Mammoth one time. And so I had no idea how that race was going to go. It was very much like a wild card situation. It's like, well, training's been going well. Let's see how this goes. But sure enough, like, I remember the first time I drove down, like 3 days before the race. We were driving through Yosemite to go to San Francisco to fly out to New York to go to the race. And I remember I did my first run down at sea level, because we're up at 8,000 feet in Mammoth training. And I go for my first run at sea level, and I swear I felt like I had like 5 lungs. I was like, this is like one of the trippiest experiences I've ever had on a run. So, I was feeling pretty good going into that race as well. But that's kind of like the backstory of like, you see someone getting emotional in a race, and you have no idea that in my mind, like, I'm back in Mammoth 3 months before that, sitting on that couch looking at that blank TV screen, eating cartons of ice cream in total like confusion and despair and heartbreak and frustration and all the crap, right? And then you remember that, and then all of a sudden you're on the streets in New York rolling out sub 440 miles, making your first Olympic team, and everything is just flowing, like feel like you're cutting through butter with a hot knife. And man, it makes you super emotional, so that's kind of like where the spiritual kind of component of that race, that's how that kind of came out, was the back, understanding the backstory behind it. It was kind of important.
And there, you broke the US trials record, 209.02.
Yeah, and that one still stands by a smidgen as well.
It was a tough course as well. It wasn't like it was a flat course. My understanding is the last couple of miles in that are pretty hilly. It's in around Central Park.
Yeah, it's the Central Park Loop, and it's funny. I've trained on that course many times, and I always feel like trash on that course. And it's just up and down, you know. But I don't know. Yeah, it was clicking that day. So
Still the record there. And then you obviously move on to Beijing. I know you finished 10th. To most people, would be pretty happy. My understanding is I think that you were disappointed on that side of that performance.
yeah. At the time, I was happy with it. Now, disappointed then, you know. But I think the disappointment for me there was more you want to have your best stuff on the biggest days, you know, and we try our best in running to make that the case, you know, with the taper and how we train and prepare, and you try to do everything just right so you hit it right. But it's frustrating when you're out there and you're like, man, I know I'm better than this, but it's not today. Today I'm not. Today I'm just this, you know. So it was good practice for me, you know, as a runner. I think always just like trying to just get 100% out of your body on the day, and not constantly comparing yourself to your previous self, you know, and to your best day ever. Just trying to improve kind of your average, you know. And so that was you know, not, I wouldn't say that was my best performance ever, but definitely you know, looking back on it now, like one that I'm proud of. Especially, I'm not particularly good in like hot and humid conditions, so being able to hold it together and run fairly well in those conditions, I was proud of that one now.
And to be fair, that day it was lightning fast at the front. Sammy Wanjiru, may he rest in peace, obviously went out at the front, and it was just guns ablazing. I was actually in
Yeah,
Beijing. I was there for that event. It was hot that day,
it
and he had
was
absolutely no respect for the 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 conditions that day at all. He just bombed out at the front and went on to like obviously cruise home.
which was smart, you know, because the whole time, like everyone's telling us and everyone's thinking, oh, it's going to be slow, it's going to be slow, it's going to be slow. So then you get someone going and pushing from the front like that, and no one's mentally ready for that, you know. And it's like but he had the fitness to back it up, you know. It's one thing to try to do that and then not be able to hold it on, but he was just, you know, in a world of his own that day for sure, the fittest guy on the planet. But it was funny. I saw him afterwards in the dining hall area in the Olympic Village, you know, and I'm like bummed out and whatever. I'm like gonna go eat like as much McDonald's as I can or whatever, you know, getting all these chicken McNuggets and stuff. I see Sammy walking out of the dining hall. He's just got the biggest armful of fruit you've ever seen. I'm like, he looks like he's like doing a competition to see how much fruit he can carry out of the dining hall. And I was like, dude, oh, he's just rubbing salt in my wounds right now.
He was something. To be fair, he was an outstanding athlete. Like it would have been no more than obviously Calvin Kiptum definitely went too early. Too early would have been fantastic to see what he could have done because that guy was just from the gun hard. Times
Yeah,
coming down, there would have been a crossover with Kipchoge. It's super kind of sad.
it is. It's, you know, it's crazy that we've lost so many guys who to accidents, car accidents, you know, marathoners who, yeah, could have really, I mean, they did change our sport, but who knows what they could have done if they had the opportunity to, you know, run out their careers. I would have been super curious to see, but it's tragic, super sad, you know, gotta be careful on those roads for sure. It's no joke over there
No,
driving.
big time, big time. So Ryan, then after you come back from Beijing, you, I know obviously in the lead up to the big run in 2011 in Boston. Can you maybe go through the lead up to that, the events, the preceding years to that? I know you had a good run in Boston in 2010, and you had a couple of other good performances.
Yeah, yeah, it had some good, like, you know, my goal was always to win a major marathon, and so I just, you know, was putting myself in the mix constantly and seeing what I could do, and had some good like top 3 at Boston, top 4 at Boston, and then things were kind of shifting. I was training for Chicago in 2010, 2010, I think. Yeah, in 2010. And I just got really run down and really tired. And then there's a little bit like friction between Terrence and I, kind of not seeing eye to eye on what was going on. And then so making a change kind of went out on my own at that point. And then Boston was my first race kind of out on my own, where I was kind of doing, I call it faith-based coaching, where I was surrounded by a lot of people who were helping me, therapists, people I was consulting with about training and stuff like that. But I was essentially like coming up with the training on my own. I had a buddy who was helping to pace me on the bike, and we talked through training and stuff as well. But that was kind of my first race, away from the Mammoth Track Club and Terrence. And so it was again one of those days where, I don't know, like I said, my career is so up and down, like a month before that race, I was feeling really good training. I'm, living in Flagstaff now, and I was up here in Flagstaff training, and training had been going really well. I thought I was in really good shape. And I went and ran the New York City half and just ran terrible. And again, had no idea. I didn't have an excuse, I was like not sick, not injured, thought I was going to run fast, didn't run fast, was super like down and depressed after that. Cause, I was like a month out from Boston. I thought I was fit, and I was like, dude, that was not it at all. But I think in hindsight, I think I just wasn't like fully tapered going into it, like I always needed that kind of like full taper to freshen up, because I trained pretty aggressively. So I think I was pretty tired, even though I might not have felt it. But again, like I popped down to sea level after that race, and I was training down at Stanford on our old stomping grounds. And I remember I was just feeling like $1,000,000 all of a sudden. It was like sometimes bad races are really helpful in turning the body on, like sometimes it felt like for me, like I had a switch. They couldn't get turned on any other way. But if I had a real bad race, it kind of flipped the switch for me. And then all of a sudden I noticed my training, I'd start feeling like amazing. And so that's what happened. I was like, I couldn't even do an easy run anymore. I was running like all my easy runs at like 5:20 pace, 5:30 pace. I remember doing easy runs, and I couldn't even like run slow anymore. I was like running like 5:20, 5:30 pace on like all my easy days. And not because I was trying to, but just because it was just happening. Things were just like clicking. And so that's how I went into Boston, was like, I know I just had a terrible race, but I'm freaking feeling like $1,000,000 right now. So I was super excited. And then we got a tailwind that year, which I'd never had a tailwind before. We always had some kind of crosswind or, unfavorable condition. So we got a tailwind, and I was
This
like,
was 2011.
yeah, this is 2011. And I was like, I'm going to make, so I remember I was on
There
the
was a
start.
tailwind.
Yeah, I was on the starting line in Hopkinton, and I remember seeing the flags were just blowing the exact direction we were going, and I was like, I'm gonna go to the front and just push. I was like, I'm gonna make the most of these conditions, because I talked to Bill Rogers before the race, who'd won Boston, like 4 times, and he was like, you'll get a tailwind like once every like 10 years. And so I was like, I'm gonna make the most of this. So the race went off, and I just went straight to the front, and it was just push, 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 push. And eventually the guys got away from me. I think I forget what point in the race it was, maybe around 15 or 16. And I caught back up for a little bit. And then, they went on to run the fastest time at that point that had ever been run, 2:03:02, I think it was, Moses Mosop. And then I was back in fourth. But I remember seeing my splits, and I was like, just hold it together, man. I was like, came through the 1 mile to go mark, and I was like right at like 2 hours. And I was like, okay, this is going to be the most painful 5-minute mile you've ever run in your life. But if you can break 5 minutes for this, you can run 2:04, I was like, do not like take it easy this last mile, like make it count. And so, I pushed as hard as I could and ran 2:04:58. And I remember I was so stoked coming across the finish line. I was probably like the most stoked fourth place finisher of all time at Boston.
So you were saying that was the most painful final 5-minute mile of all time.
Yeah, it was definitely my most painful. I've run a lot of sub 5-minute miles, but that was the most painful one. But worth it, to come across the line, see 2:04:58. I remember just being so stoked. It was definitely the most excited fourth place finisher of probably any marathon ever.
How did that feel? Was it an unbelievable feeling running sub 2:05?
It was. I'd run 2:06 at that point. It was my best time before that. And I just never expected to run that fast on that course. I don't think anyone, because the course record going into that was like 2:06 or something like that. So I don't think no one ever thought of Boston as potentially being fast until we ran that day. In those conditions, of course, it was going to be fast. But I think even in those conditions, like people didn't never thought they'd see those kind of times on Boston. So it was pretty special just to be a part of a historic race too. Like cool to get to help push those guys too, so that they could do something special and run 2:03, the fastest time of all time at that point. It was cool to be a part of that race.
No, it was obviously an outstanding performance. And you went on to finish second in the 2012 Olympic trials.
Yeah, I ended up second behind Meb in that one, and made my second Olympic team. So, things were clicking really well. And then, training for London. Well, actually, it was training for that Olympic trials. I came down with plantar fasciitis, and that was kind of like the beginning of my unraveling. Just because I ran through it, my stride changed, and then it was kind of like one thing got hurt on one side, and then I get hurt on the other side, and it started this kind of ridiculous string of kind of really serious injuries. At that point, I had injuries before, but never like stress reactions, never torn quad muscles, never the severity of the injuries that I had. They were kind of all triggered from getting plantar fasciitis. So, yeah, that one was kind of my Achilles heel. It was kind of the beginning of the end for me.
Okay, and you retired it in 2016. Was that correct? Yeah, I know you had a couple of races. I know you pushed hard in the LA Marathon one year for the first couple of miles.
Yeah,
But I think it was like early 2016 when you retired.
Yeah, I retired in 2016. I was kind of at the point where I just tried everything I could try. It was, 4 years of injury after injury, struggle after struggle, and just not, my body just not being responsive to any kind of training that I would do. Or it seemed like no matter what I did, it was the same result. My body was just kind of like blah. And it felt like it was time to just start giving back to my body. So that's when, yeah, I retired, but I went straight into the weight room and started giving back to my body. Weights are a nice way to kind of balance out the active running, which can be pretty catabolic in nature, especially when done at, when you're running high volumes, especially, you're running over 100 miles a week, etc., training twice a day. That's not the most, I'd say, natural way for me to live anyways. My body didn't love that lifestyle. I was generally pretty tired all the time, sleeping a ton, just eat, sleep, run kind of situation. And so it's nice for me to get to be kind of normalize my life a little bit, normalize my body, and balance it out with the weight training. So that's when I got kind of fully into the weight training, and onto kind of a new challenge of trying to get as big and strong as I could get, coming from 127 pound distance runner with no strength and very little muscle, especially in the upper body.
Was it pretty exciting times? Were you pretty excited at the time? Like, because obviously a lot of people after they retire from elite athletics, there's a bit of a, they feel a bit down afterwards. But obviously you had another goal. So was it, you seem to kind of move on pretty quickly and get in another focus in your life.
Yeah, it was really nice to like have something that you wake up excited to do. I think that's, probably where a lot of pros when they retire, where they struggle, is they don't have anything. They wake up in the morning and they're not excited about something. And that's a tough way to live. So, yeah, the lifting was kind of like a fun like hobby to pour myself into, and it was fun because I was seeing such good results from the training I was doing, mainly because I was so bad anyways. It's like any kind of training would have worked. So when it's fun to do things you're terrible at, 'cause it's really easy to improve. So I remember just seeing pretty dramatic results right away is always encouraging. It kind of feeds the flames and makes you excited to see what you can do with it. And at the same time, it's like my lifestyle hadn't really changed too much, because I was still, part of Sarah, still running professionally. So I was going to her workouts, pacing her on the bike. So the general lifestyle was about the same, but what I was personally excited about in terms of fitness had changed.
Yeah, obviously increased calories, no running at all at that
No,
time.
I think the first like 7 months or something, I don't think I ran like at all, like zero. I just went completely cold turkey with it. And then when I came back to running, it felt so awkward and weird because I was like 30 pounds heavier. So I was like, this feels completely different and not great. So yeah, I'd lost my runner body I think for good.
And just sorry there, because we've mentioned Sarah, I haven't really talked about her at all. So Sarah, I know you said times were tough in Stanford, but obviously there's always a silver lining. You met Sarah in Stanford in freshman year, sophomore year.
Yeah, we actually met in high school, because we were both high school cross country runners in California. So we met at a Foot Locker regional meet there, and then yeah, we both went to Stanford, started dating first week of freshman year. I had to scoop her up quick because she was highly sought after, and so yeah, we started dating then, and then yeah, we dated all 4 years, and we got engaged right after our fourth year in college, and then got married shortly thereafter. So yeah, now it's crazy. We've been married for quite a while. That was 2005, so almost 20 years.
She knows the exact date, Ryan. I'm not going to pin you on the exact date or the number of days you're married.
Like 18 or 19 or something.
And obviously, Sarah's had obviously an outstanding career as well from a longevity point of view. Like you obviously retired in, I suppose, your early 30s or 30. She's went on to do fantastic things, breaking
Right,
American record holder, second in London.
right. She had like her whole career
A lot of
after.
and still going strong. And she's not finished yet. She's another couple of big races in her.
Yeah, I think she's really good at listening to her body, and I've never been good at that. I've always been like just push, 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 and that doesn't tend to work great in terms of longevity in the sport. And I feel like I had a fairly long career, but she's certainly just been getting better and better, which is cool. See her running so well at 41 now and still on top of her game.
Yeah, she's very Tom Brady-esque.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I know you were loved by the fans, but I think she might actually outscore you in that she is absolutely adored by the fans. Like people
Yeah,
talk about her, and I know I met you in the hotel in London. Like people absolutely love her down there and all across the US.
yeah, she is. She's a special person. I got lucky.
No, it's brilliant. But so Ryan, just obviously, you started pumping iron. Your good friend Matthew Barnett came with a proposal to you one day. As we say in Ireland, he sold you a pop. You thought, okay, we'll do this adventure together. I know you had a couple of injuries during the event as well. I don't think it was the kind of swan song you thought it would be to your running career when you done the 777 in 2017.
Yeah, that was just actually a really cool thing though, because the way my running career started was with this like big 15-mile run around the lake in my hometown. And I never got a lot of closure to my running career because it just kind of like I just started getting hurt all the time, got run down, and then 4 years later it's kind of like my last race was terrible, and that was it. And I was like, well, that wasn't very like good closure. So this was actually a cool way, doing the 777 kind of gave me more of a kind of a closure to my career to to be able to come back and do something really epic and really cool and adventurous and fun with other people and support Pastor Matthew and the Dream Center. And then, get to meet you and all the people who were on the trip. Like, it was just such a cool, like, lifetime experience, and in a cool way for me to like get to say goodbye to running, because I didn't get to say goodbye, and yeah, not the most quickest marathon of my life on that last one in Sydney, but also super memorable. Like, I remember when we were just doing that mile out, mile back course on the right there on the ocean in Sydney, and the moon was out and blazing and the waves were crashing down, and I got to enjoy it for 5.5 hours. I never got to enjoy a marathon for that long before. So it was pretty cool. Yeah, just an amazing experience. Definitely learned some things though. I remember my first marathon in Antarctica. I had the great idea of like, I didn't want to lose all my muscle, so I was going to eat a bunch of protein bars during the race. So I was eating all these like protein bars that I had. Like every lap, I'd eat like 2 protein bars or something. And I remember I got to like 23 miles and I was just craving sugar so bad because I just been eating like all this protein. And I remember like they had these little tents set up and it was unmanned, but there's a whole bunch of like candy and fruit and crackers or whatever in there. And I just went in there and just like raided it. And I just like started eating so much sugar because I was like just craving carbs so bad. It's like, yeah, there's a reason why we eat carbohydrates when we run.
Had you done much preparation for the event, the 777 at the time?
No, I was still into the lifting, so that was my main focus. So I was just running like 3 days a week, like 30 minutes a day. So I wasn't really trained for it. And that's what kind of came back to get me because my body wasn't used to the pounding at all. So it was a really interesting experience though, like one that I'll never forget because I was actually getting in better shape as the week was going on. So like my first marathon in Antarctica, I was like, all right, I think I forget what my time was, like 3:30 or something. I don't know, somewhere in there. But I was getting quicker and quicker. I remember like day 4 in Spain, I felt like death. I was like, I hate this sport. I was like, I never want to run another step in my life, but I have to run a marathon tomorrow in Morocco. And so I started running in Morocco. I was like, this is gonna suck, dude. This is gonna be the worst day of my life. And like I started feeling so good in that race. And like I started out real slow and then I like was coming home quick. I was like, nice. I was like, I'm getting in shape now. And so I was all stoked for day 5. I think we're going in Dubai. Where were we in? I forget. Somewhere else. Dubai, I think.
It was Dubai. It was a flat course in Dubai.
Yeah. I was all stoked for that one, but then my hip started hurting after the race in Morocco and Marrakesh. And man, my hip started catching fire in that race. So then I ended up like I think walking like part of the back half of that race. And then I knew Sydney day 7. I was like, this is gonna be bad for me. I remember I stood up after our flight, and I took like one step on my hip and it was like that really sharp take your breath away kind of pain. I was like, this is not good. This is not good. And so it's just trying to I was pretty sure I had a stress reaction at that point, but you never know for sure, but I was like, I've come this far. I was like, I gotta get at least finish this marathon. So that's why my day 7 in Sydney was not the swiftest of
So after
days.
that, you officially retired from running. And my
Yeah.
understanding is you, for a couple of years afterwards, you ran it some with your daughters, but very little. But in
Yeah.
the last couple of months,
Yeah. What happened
the
is
big comeback.
what happened is I started getting out into the mountains, which is cool because that's how I kind of fell in love with the sport, was in the mountains, running in trails and stuff like that. And so we started going to Crested Butte to train, Crested Butte, Colorado. And the mountains there are just like, I mean, what I'm used to in California, it's that on steroids, just huge mountains everywhere. And just, it's like the further back you go in the mountains, the further back you want to go. And so it's like you're only limited by your own fitness. And so that's where I started being like, I want to get in shape so I can like go do some get back there even further, and get on these 14,000-foot mountains that are a little further back. So I started running more and doing some bigger days in the mountains. And that's really kind of like what rehooked me. And then I've been, running more since then, doing some longer routes, doing some fun stuff. Like last year, I got to do rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, which was super cool. So now it's kind of like running is like a fun like vehicle and way for me to get to experience the mountains. And for me it's like a pretty spiritual experience out there as well. So and then it's fun to be able to like run with Sarah on her easy days as well, and my kids run a little bit. So it's been fun to kind of get back in it. But finding that I do have to take a little bit different approach now compared to when I was 30 pounds lighter. I'm finding that like the pounding and the impact on my body is a lot more significant than when I was 137 pounds compared to now I'm like 170. So, and like you said, I was even up to like 200 and higher than that, and that was even harder on, mainly it's like the knees. The impact on the knees is pretty significant when you're doing a lot of vert, going up and down and stuff. It can be pretty tough on the knees. So doing a lot of like strengthening and trying to get the knees as strong as I can get them to be able to handle the load.
Nice. And are you running? How many days a week you run at the moment, Ryan?
I've been running 3 days a week, but I try to just make it count. So if I'm gonna go out, like get in a significant run, well, I kind of just listen to my body now. Going back to mistakes I made in my career where I just push, push, push. Now it's kind of like I try to not have too much of an idea of what I want to do, so that I can just kind of flow with how I'm feeling. So, but still doing some fun stuff, like I've been doing, getting down to Sedona. There's some fun, like 18-mile loops out there I've been doing. And I was down in the Grand Canyon the other day with Jim Walmsley and Chris Vargo and some guys. We did a fun, like little 21-mile loop down to the bottom and back up and stuff. So it's cool. We have so much cool stuff around us here in Flagstaff between Sedona, the Grand Canyon, and then we got like Moab, Bryce Canyon, Zion, all that's not too far away. And then in the summer, I'll head back up to Crested Butte and be doing some fun stuff in the mountains up there. So mainly just like, people ask me all the time, like, are you going to race again and stuff like that? And you desire race? I'm like, no, I'm just out there for the good times. I just enjoy myself out there. And it's nice to like, not like I do want to get fit so I can do these bigger routes, and get in better shape so I can hit some stuff that I can't otherwise hit. Cause I like to just do like 1 day routes. And there's so much beautiful stuff to see out in Colorado, but it's also nice to like not be in a hurry. It's like, we'll stop and like break through some ice so that we can jump in these high alpine lakes or see a tree that we want to climb and climb it, or meditate on top of a mountain. And it's fun to just like also like just take your time and like soak it up, soak in the view. Sometimes it's like when you're moving fast, you miss so much, especially in trail running, because you gotta like look down so you don't break an ankle. So it's nice to kind of take your time with it sometimes as well.
And do you think, Ryan, like the Great World Race coming up in November now, training, will anything change? Will you continue what you're doing? Will you increase the number of days? I don't think you could possibly increase the number of hours, because my understanding is there's some days you do 8 to 10 hours out on the trails.
Yeah, those big days are enough hours for sure. I'll probably just see how my body's feeling. Like I'd rather like I want to make sure I go into it with in a healthy state. Like that's more important than, I mean, I could do it last time off, 30-minute runs 3 times a week. So I know I can do it. The matter, but it is more fun. It's like the fitter you are, the more fun it will be as well. So I do want to be as fit as possible for it, but without compromising health wise. So I think it's gonna be largely just determined on how my body's feeling. If I'm able to run more, I will run more. If my body, is telling me like, you can gotta stick to 3 days, then it's like, okay, let's see what we can do off 3 days a week. Make it count. But like a lot of the challenges have to do with like travel and recovery and all that. So just making sure, like last time around when I did it, I was like, oh, I'm so tired of doing all this stretching and rolling and recovery stuff. So like I didn't even wear compression tights or anything like that. And I remember, yeah, in Sydney on day 7, I looked down at my ankles and I was like, are those elephant ankles? I was like, I don't even recognize those at all. So I was like so swollen up. So I'm not going to be stupid this time around. I'm going to do all the recovery stuff. I remember like people brought like Normatec boots and stuff like that. And like that stuff helps for sure. So I'm going to be pulling on some more of those things to make sure my body stays healthy but have it more accustomed to the load, the pounding, so that I don't run into the problem getting a stress fracture again, because I'd like to finish this one out healthy this time.
Fresh sprinting at the end. And you've done it before. You're out in the wild now training. Any advice for people out there on fueling, training, recovery on the plane? I know you've given a bit of guidelines there regarding compression socks, etc., but more so on the training, the fueling in the lead
Yeah,
up.
yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, I mean, from a fueling perspective, I mean, it's like we have a training business, and our whole thing is like a holistic approach. It's like not enough to just do the training, right? It's like the recovery is more important than the training, even. So things like just your daily sleep habits, like going into the trip super well rested, in a good rested state. Because I remember Mike Wardian, when he set the record, like he was hardly sleeping at all on the plane. I was like, dude, I don't even know how you're running anymore. He wasn't getting much rest at all. And your body, can sustain that for short periods of time. But if you go into the trip fried, then you're really in trouble, So I think making sure, yeah, your body's in as healthy a state as possible going into it, and practicing your fueling as well, I think is super important. It's like stick to the things work. Like don't be eating protein bars out there like I was. Um, I think that is really huge when you're running. I mean, the amount of miles, it's what 185 miles in a week. And so the amount of food you need to consume. I remember when I was doing it my first time, someone's like, this is more of like an eating competition than a running competition, and maybe not to that extent. You don't need to eat like 100 hot dogs every single day, but you do need to be making sure your fueling's on point, because that it's crazy how significant that is to how you feel. Oftentimes you feel like trash on a run, and then you like take a gel and you're like, oh, I actually feel good. Like the body responds well to when it's well fueled and well taken care of. So doing those things, I think, is super super important. So just making sure you're traveling with everything you need, for each one of your races. Make sure you have it well thought out, well planned, what you're going to take, when you're going to take it, and being ready for a variety of conditions that we're going to face. Heat, cold. So if we're in some hotter conditions, doing some sauna training leading up to it, 20-minute sauna sessions 3 to 4 times a week, I think could be really helpful for people who don't live in hot environments. Um, but yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm super excited. It's the memory of a lifetime the first time around, and really like what I loved about it, I think the most was like the people that we met on the trip. Like so many cool people that first time around, and these are people who do these things. They're usually very cool, like-minded people that it's going to be a good time to just hang out with, and it's fun to get to see each other out there and encourage each other, and we'll all be out there together taking this thing on and cheering for each other. It's a really cool kind of environment, so I'm looking forward to getting back in that and being a part of it.
It's good. And I know you've some two of the girls that are doing the event, Ashley Paulson and Corrine Nigem. I think you've coached them before. They've been at some of your coaching seminars. So the two girls are
Yeah,
actually stoked to have you on board as well. There's kind of there'll be a team spirit there of previous history as well.
I know. Yeah, I'm stoked. Yeah, I've coached them both before, so they're gonna have to return some favors now. Maybe pace me or something a little bit, or at least like give me some donuts out there.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. No, but listen, Ryan, it's great to talk to you, and obviously, hopefully, in the future yourself, and hopefully Sarah will end up doing the Great World Race. But we're looking forward to obviously having you in October. And I just checked your combined time. I think the last time was 3:39:36 was your overall average time. And I think your last marathon was over 5 hours, so I'm sure it'll be overall the average will be significantly faster this year.
We'll see. You never know, but I would like to finish it up better than last time for sure.
We make no promises. Listen, Ryan, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David. Stoked to be a part of this.
Always great to talk to a legend. That's all.